Story 1. I once wrote a poem that began, "Why do I rhyme with cry?" Story 2. Air guitar at a talent show. I was nowhere near cool enough for people to get the joke, and nowhere near confident enough to ham it up. So it was me and three similarly awkward friends on stage for 3 minutes, vaguely miming guitar motions and shuffling our feet a bit. Story 3. In the midst of my teenage emotional angst, I burned my dad a CD that only had the song Perfect by Simple Plan, and I played the CD for him one day after he got home from work. He had just gotten home and hadn't even put his lunch case down. I stood next to the boombox. He stood next to the boombox. We both stood there listening. I'm sorry, I can't be perfect. Story 4. Oh boy, buckle up. This one still makes me cringe. When I was about 13, I went through a hardcore horse phase. And I don't just mean I liked horses. I thought I was one. I was that kid. I was obsessed with horses in every possible way. I had horse posters, horse figurines, and I even read books about horse care, even though I had never actually been near a real horse. But the most embarrassing part? I started acting like a horse in public. I convinced myself and tried to convince my friends that I was part horse or something. I literally ran around on all fours during recess, neighing, flicking my tail, which was just my hair in a ponytail, and doing what I thought was a majestic gallop across the field. When people asked why I was doing it, I just looked at them seriously and said, I feel like a horse trapped in a human body, like I was dead serious. To make it worse, I had this weird habit of refusing to use normal language during lunch. I would only communicate through neighing or nodding my head like a horse, as if I was some majestic stallion too good for words. My friends tried to be supportive, but it was so awkward when I neighed at the lunch table in front of other people. I even begged my parents to let me eat apples and carrots like a horse during dinner. The peak of this disaster? One day, during gym class, we were playing soccer, and I decided it was the perfect time to show everyone my horse speed. I broke into a full-on gallop across the field, dodging players and neighing like my life depended on it. Everyone just stopped and stared as I pranced around the field, neighing and pretending to kick the ball like a hoofed animal. I will never forget the look on my physical education teacher's face when she finally blew the whistle and asked, "Are you okay?" I thought I was being majestic, but I looked completely insane. Needless to say, the horse phase came to an abrupt end when my crush asked me if I was feeling okay after that whole gym class incident. The embarrassment hit me like a freight train, and I quickly retired my horse persona for good. But to this day, whenever I see a horse, I cringe at the memory of my 13-year-old self galloping around like a wannabe stallion. Story 5. My friend had a sweet 16 party and I was not invited, which was nothing personal since the guest list was made before we became close. I jokingly asked if I could come dressed as Gene Simmons from the band Kiss, and she said yes. So I attended the Sweet 16 party where everyone was dressed in typical Sweet 16 attire, and I was cosplaying as Gene Simmons with full hair and makeup. Story 6. I kissed a girl awkwardly one time and thought that meant we were dating. I changed my relationship status to dating on Facebook with her without even asking her. She explained to me that we were not. It is so painful to think about. Story 7. Wore my skin-tight leopard pants and carried a boombox everywhere to play music loudly in public. My goodness, everyone. Story 8. You are wearing a zip-up hoodie with pockets. The zipper is open. Both hands are in the front pockets. While your hands are in the pockets, lift the entire lower part of the hoodie up and over your head. Rest your arms so they hang at shoulder level like wings. You feel cool. I walked like this often. I have no regrets. I was probably full of embarrassment. Story 9. We had a small fundraiser fair every year at my high school. They had a marriage booth where you could pretend to marry your boyfriend, girlfriend, or friends. I thought it would be very funny to marry my own hand for some reason, so I drew a face on it to act like a puppet and married it. There were photos and everything. Thankfully, they are gone now. It did not occur to me until years later that there are certain connotations to something like that. Story 10. I realized that I had to change my personality and wanted to be the straightest guy possible. Originally, I was going to be Barney from How I Met Your Mother, but I found out the actor was gay, so I instead chose Tamaki from our own high school host club. It backfired. Story 11. Oh, nothing. I just recorded onto cassette an entire album full of low-quality trance music I made using MTV Music Generator, a PlayStation game. I made several copies for my friends, including my crush. At the end of her copy, I recorded a long, strange confession of my feelings. Then, nothing happened, and nobody mentioned anything. She probably never listened to it. I was so awkward. Story 12. I tried to give myself emo hair by tangling it and adding hairspray. I also drew mustaches on my finger with the emo hair and took pictures. Additionally, I wore ugly neon square glasses in the pictures. Story 13. In the summer of 1984, I, along with many of my peers, thought we could all get beautiful golden highlights with the new beauty product Sunin. We all came back to school with orange hair. Story 14. Posted multiple pictures to MySpace of me with excess drawn over my eyes with black eyeliner. I thought it was so emotional and edgy. Story 15. Made a fake girlfriend, pretended to be her, faked her death and faked my own mental breakdown. I was such a loser that I am still climbing out of the mental hole I made for myself. Story 16. Double popped collar polo shirt. What was I thinking? Story 17. Trying to impress my crush by doing karaoke, and trust me, I cannot sing. Story 18. When I was 15 years old, a friend and I stole a bathtub and sailed down a river. After a couple of miles, we went into the river and made a fire to dry ourselves. The fire turned into a grass fire, and the local fire department came. They had to close the main road and the railway line to put out the fire. All they found was a bathtub and the remains of a bonfire. Story 19. Everything I did feels like an embarrassing moment. Story 20. I had a very large golden jaguar earring with a fake diamond in its mouth that I believed was worthy of making my profile picture. I was not very cool. Story 21. Stare at girls in high school rather than talk to them. I still cringe at the thought of it 30 years later. Story 22. My first relationship was in high school. The first time I went to her house, we went on her bed, and I just froze. I couldn't bring myself to kiss her. Then I rolled off the bed and went under it. I'm not autistic, but I don't know what I was thinking. We eventually kissed anyway. Now, 12 years later, I was seeing a girl who was very timid and didn't talk much. I really didn't know if I was supposed to make any sort of move or not. Took me back 12 years. Story 23. At 14 years old, I went on a family trip far away. When I got back, I told my friends I had met a boy who did not exist. I have no idea why. It was like one of those teenage angst movie cliches. Anyway, I had to say he died in a dirt bike accident when they wanted to meet him. Most cringe-worthy moment. Oh my God. What was younger me thinking? You dork. Story 24. That time my mother caught me touching a raw chicken breast in the kitchen while moaning and moving my hips. I think I was pretending it was a breast. Story 25. I want to preface this by saying I was only 12. I had the biggest crush on this guy. I literally thought I was in love. I couldn't even speak when I was around him. So I came up with a plan. I asked my friend to pretend that she supported us as a couple, thinking it might make him realize we'd work together. One time, I told my friend in private that I wished I could hug him, and she diligently went up to him and convinced him to hug me at lunchtime so she could test out her one true pairing or some silly fanfiction idea like that. I was like a weird tween mafia boss manipulating, through my friend, this very average-looking boy I had somehow fallen in love with into hugging me. This boy had never even looked in my direction before then. Worse, after the hug, I emailed my friend, because I am old, best 5 seconds of my life. I cringed so hard because I was being completely genuine. People say getting old sucks, but oh my God, all the money in the world wouldn't convince me to redo that part of my life. Story 26. I had a crush on a girl. Admittedly, we had only talked a couple of times, and one of those was just hanging around in a group of mutual friends. But of course, as a lonely, chronically online, socially inept teenager, I didn't know how to actually express romantic interest in her like normal people do. I had never asked a girl out in my life, so instead, I wrote a long sappy Facebook post about how much I liked her and tagged her in it. This, of course, was at around 3 a.m. on a school night because of insomnia and internet addiction, both still in full force today. I really don't know what I was thinking or why I thought this would be a good idea. I woke up the next morning, or about 3 hours later, to the absolute mess this had created, and I realized I had made a horrible mistake. I couldn't delete it then. The damage had been done. She stopped me at school that day and said she was flattered and that I was very brave. But then she blocked me and we never spoke again. She unblocked me some time later, just in time for her to get married to someone I always thought was unpleasant. As a nerdy, chronically online, somewhat edgy teenager, I thought everyone was unpleasant. Now they have 2 children. Probably 10 years have passed. And after cringing so hard my face gets stuck every time this post comes up in Time Hop and Facebook memories, I finally deleted it. I wish I could delete everything I posted on Facebook before I was 18. I was such an idiot. I'd really much rather forget this ever happened. But somehow I keep getting reminded of the dumbest thing I've ever done, and that's coming from someone who's done a lot of really dumb things. But I did a lot of stupid things trying to impress crushes besides, talking to them. Story 27. I once tried to impress someone by dancing at a party and ended up tripping and knocking over a drink. Story 28. Probably rearranged my top 8 on MySpace as if it mattered at all. Story 29. I was painfully religious and started a campaign where I would slap anyone who cursed around me. It only lasted a couple of days but was still cringe-worthy. I also once told my girlfriend's sister to go back inside and pass out. When she was at the door one night, drinking a little, she said, "I'm not drunk." She had every right to add, "You twat." I had no idea how drinking worked. I had been taught that if you had one single drink, you were an alcoholic and a boozer. Story 30. I went through a random stage where I would frequently blurt out a word in an attempt to be funny, then say it was because I was so random. Yeah, that's cool. Sprouts. Why did you say that? I don't know. I'm just so random. I wish I could punch younger me. Story 31. I was very into Naruto. My best friend and I would talk about it endlessly and annoy everyone around us. We drew little pictures and had inside jokes. We made up theories just in our own little world. It was extremely cringeworthy to everyone around us, and I would definitely avoid my younger self if I met her. But I still look back at those times fondly. Story 32. Never delete this. This makes me feel so much better knowing I am not the only unusual one. Story 33. I felt very sad at a school dance, as if I were personally moved by the lyrics to Stairway to Heaven, which was playing. I stopped dancing to sit quietly against a column and reflect on the song while it played. Story 34. In English class, when reading Romeo and Juliet, I always tried to get the Romeo lines if my crush had to read the Juliet lines. Later, I got her phone number from her friend and sent her song lyrics. I still remember her response the first time. "What is this?" It was really strange. Story 35. Recorded myself miming to the song Crazy Nights, singing into a broom handle. Fringed leather jacket and perm completed the look. Story 36. Became a die-hard fan of Insane Clown Posse. I wore clown makeup once. It was really bad. I do feel like they helped me through some dark times, though. Story 37. I had undiagnosed, untreated borderline personality disorder, so literally everything. Story 38. Trying to identify as a werewolf because this was during the time Twilight was huge and I was a huge Jacob fan. Story 39. Middle school dances, I would sing along to songs and yell the curse words really loud because I thought I was rebellious. Story 40. Wrote cringe emo lyrics up my arms in permanent marker my freshman year of high school. Really huge and bold too. I don't know why, it was far more cringe than cool, but I was expressing myself, I guess. Story 41. I got in a fight with a brick wall and lost. I was 14, and she seemed impressed when I mentioned I knew Taekwondo, so I demonstrated a few kicks on a nearby wall. Everything was fine. She was all, "Wow, neat," and giggling, but then I took it a step too far. I decided to end my showing off with a spinning jump kick, but was too close to the wall. When I kicked it, it hurled me backwards, toppling into her and knocking both of us down. My elbow landed right on her eye, and that was the end of the date. She laughed it off and said it was cool, but her eye was still swollen, black, and bloodshot 3 days later at school. She never talked to me again, making a visible effort to walk away quickly when she saw me. That was the cringe part to me, how quickly things changed due to a simple accident. Story 42. I was part of a particularly awful round of doorbell ditch one night. My friends pounded on a total stranger's door at 2 a.m., just for fun. We did a number of crazy things that night, but that is the one I cannot get over. Now that I am a homeowner in my late 30s, I can easily imagine how terrified, unsettled, and confused I would be if I were on the receiving end. Karma has not caught up to me yet. Story 43. I smoked catnip once because I thought it would give me a high. Story 44. I was very flirty with a teacher, and I still cringe every time I think about that. A few years later, I started studying to become an English language teacher. At my college, you did not pick your own internships. They chose for you. And what internship did I get? One at my old high school. I managed to avoid that teacher for 2 weeks until one day I suddenly heard, "Hi, my name." I looked back, and there he was, grinning like he knew I had been avoiding him. He was really chill about it, though. Story 45. I was a massive flip-flop. I thought I was such a sultry ingenue, but in reality, I was a cringy, dirty-kneed individual with the subtlety of the Grand Canyon. Story 46. Went to high school in full Naruto costume, even spiked my hair. There were no conventions or anything. I just really liked Naruto. Almost 20 years later, I recently got back into Naruto. The only difference now is hoodies instead of full cosplay when I leave the house. Story 47. Oh man, I once tried to impress a crush by writing them a long poetic love letter and accidentally sent it to the entire class. Instant regret and endless embarrassment. I cringed just thinking about it. Story 48. Was unkind to my mother. I have since apologized. I am pregnant with my own child and would not be surprised if I received similar treatment. Story 49. I would break up with girlfriends to avoid celebrating Valentine's Day and sometimes Christmas. I still hate celebrating Valentine's Day with a passion, and my wife knows it. Story 50. I grew up on an Air Force base in Europe. I was living on Crete, Greece. Just outside the base, there was a mountain range. In about the middle of the mountain, in several places, the Germans had dug caves. My friends and I set out to have a look. Deep inside these caves, we found mortar rounds and took them. We carried them to the top of the mountain and threw the bombs off to see if they would explode. They did not. We climbed down, got them, and went home. One of my friend's dads found his stash. The next day at school, military police came for me. I did not know military police were doing the same at my dad's office. We went to my house, I gave them the bombs, they left. I got my backside tanned and a long stretch in the bedroom prison, where I spent my days tossing from hand to hand the one warhead I kept. Story 51. I made emotional atheism-related memes with text above and below my face. Story 52. Accident on the stage the afternoon before a huge school play. It was a very urgent emergency. Nobody ever found out who it was. Story 53. In early high school or middle school, there used to be presentations in English class on different topics. I started doing funny and informative presentations, but it kind of got out of hand to the point that I dressed as Mickey Mouse at one point. However, I was still delivering an informative presentation, and both the class and the English teacher really loved the creative approach I took. The awkward part was that at one point the presentation was about historical figures, and I chose Hitler. I spent most of the time drawing the armband for the small costume rather than actually studying. When it was my turn, it was funny for the first 2 minutes, but I had zero accurate information, and the little things I said were wrong. For example, I incorrectly said he was German, which showed a lack of knowledge. The teacher then reprimanded me very strongly. I appreciate that the teacher was strict because it was a wake-up call for me not to treat presentations as merely comedy acts. I still include some humor or jokes in college presentations, but maybe 2 or 3 in the 15 minutes I have, just to keep people interested. Story 54. Used JNCO jeans with many chains and wristbands and a band shirt. My favorite was a glow-in-the-dark white zombie t-shirt. Story 55. I used to unironically wear blazers over anything with a couple of friends. We called it the Blazer Brigade. We were also in a band together that played a few shows where we intentionally performed shirtless. Story 56. Walked around the halls at my high school between class periods singing My Chemical Romance songs at full volume with my best friend many times. Story 57. I did the late 1990s and early 2000s style and had frosted tips for about a year and a half. Story 58. Lied about my age on Ombl chat to guys when I was around 15 or 16. Oof. Story 59. I brought Pokemon temporary tattoos to school when I was 14. My friends and I wanted to use them, but we were not near a sink, so we stood in the hallway licking them onto our skin. Story 60. I dated a total anime fan in high school. No hate, this guy was genuinely kind, and I still enjoy anime, so I'm not judging. He did some awkward things, like unironically wearing a fedora and trench coat, carrying an umbrella that looked like a katana when closed, and wanting to call me Nico as a nickname. But I was awkward too. We went on 2 dates over 2 weeks, and I was painfully shy on both. I avoided him for another week before working up the courage to end it, whatever it was. He agreed but remained kind to me. I hope to run into him someday, so I can tell him it wasn't his fault. I was just a lesbian who hadn't realized it yet. Story 61. Drew an X on my bathroom mirror to take selfies with because I was hardcore. Story 62. Tried too hard to impress people by pretending to like things I did not care about. Looking back, it is a solid facepalm moment. Story 63. Not caring about my senior pictures and submitting a horrible picture that I cannot even look at to this day. Story 64. My friend and I used to spend hours at the mall speaking only in English accents, likely unconvincingly, telling anyone we encountered that we were from Liverpool. I do not know, I guess there are worse things, but what did we think we were doing? Story 65. Tried to convince my bullies that I knew witchcraft and tried to make them think I cursed them. Story 66. Oh, I was so into My Little Pony. Looking back, I think it's because I love bright colors and cartoons. I'm really into Hell of a Boss now. I do maintain the show had a genuinely good sense of humor, but especially seeing what the adult fan base became, I'm glad I got out when I did. Story 67. There was a girl I had a crush on, and she seemed to really like me. We talked a lot over text. She was always a bit of an intermittent texter but was open about this. I asked her out, and she stopped responding. I asked her out again, and again. I might not have just double texted but texted about 10 times, growing increasingly upset that she wasn't responding. Never again. It was so creepy. But I'm glad I got it out of my system at 15. Story 68. I have dark curly hair. Before I had a curl routine, my curls were frizzy. I had a thing for Guns N' Roses in high school, especially Slash. I used to intentionally frizz my hair more than usual and dye it black. I would put on a pair of aviators, add some black eye makeup, and pretend I was Slash. Story 69. Did not show up for work. Told everyone I had an allergic reaction to something. I am not allergic to anything. I was just depressed. My mother called the police on me that day. I was just at a park, revisiting my childhood. I am a well-adjusted adult these days. That was a hard time in my life. Story 70. I have somewhat thick eyebrows. I tried to pluck them when I was 12 and cried a lot. I decided a razor would work to shape them instead. I accidentally shaved off a whole eyebrow. I can't remember how long it took to grow back. I think I have blocked this part from my memory due to embarrassment. Story 71. I can't remember exactly why we did it, but one day in high school we visited a retirement home to help out and do various activities. At the time, I was a socially awkward person who liked World War II history. I still am a little. Anyway, I saw an elderly man in a wheelchair. I started thinking maybe he served in the war, maybe he was a paratrooper who had a failed landing, maybe he was injured during the Normandy landings. I was intrigued. I wanted to know. I certainly wasn't aware of the social etiquette of not asking people about their experiences in the war, nor was I aware of what post-traumatic stress disorder is. So what left my mouth was essentially, "So why are you in a wheelchair?" Luckily, he was deaf, so I had a chance to dismiss my question. I certainly should not have used that opportunity to ask again. in a louder, clearer voice. Story 72. There are so many things to remember, but one standout memory makes me physically cringe. We had a talent show at my middle school, and all the homerooms performed acts together as groups. I, along with a few other girls, convinced not only my entire homeroom but also my male homeroom teacher that we should do a mock striptease to the song Too Sexy by Right Said Fred. Honestly, I'm not sure how we weren't all expelled and my teacher wasn't fired. Pretty sure no one in the audience was amused by our performance. I was in 8th grade. Seems like many responses are from things people did while they were also in 8th grade, a cursed time of life. We had multiple rehearsals of this performance during homeroom. The teacher had many chances to stop us but did not. Story 73. Went to a man's house alone that I met on America Online Chat. Story 74. Sat on a sofa next to a girl at a party. Yawned and stretched my arms wide behind her shoulders. Dropped my arm across her shoulders nonchalantly. Story 75. I sang my heart out passionately in front of a crowd at a school talent show, only to realize halfway through that my voice cracked and the lyrics completely slipped my mind. Story 76. Unusual hair and clothing to follow trends and impress colleagues. Story 77. I was a teenager. I probably did a lot of cringe-worthy stuff. Story 78. Wore the old school actual chain and master lock around my neck in high school. Story 79. Ask a South Korean friend which Korea she was from. It was so embarrassing that I have memorized the entire map now. Story 80. I was the negative type of involuntary celibate. I like to think I am better than that now. Story 81. I sang Never Gonna Give You Up to the girl I liked over text because we pranked each other all the time. Story 82. Poetry on Zanga under some variation of the Silver Phantom username. You could not waterboard the exact contents out of me 20 years later. Story 83. Wear my pants below my waist with a sideways flat-brimmed hat and oversized t-shirt. I was a middle-class suburban white kid. Story 84. Played Gunbound and became obsessed. I went on the forums and created about 10 threads with ideas for newsbots. Someone made a new thread mocking my posts, and it received many likes. Story 85. I was a bit of a pyromaniac when I was a kid. A neighbor left a toilet seat by the side of the road for trash pickup after they had replaced it. For some reason, I decided it would be fun to try to light it on fire but didn't do more than just char a small piece of it. It turned out someone saw me and told my parents. I had to go and apologize to the owner. A toilet seat. Story 86. I sang Let's Have Some Fun in Minecraft at an elementary school talent show. I did not get to finish it because the teacher thought I went too long. Story 87. I ran an account on Google Plus and YouTube, where I pretended to be Drossel Keynes from Black Butler. I was part of several roleplay groups and became mildly popular for it. I shudder when I think about it now. Story 88. I was just mean, not a bully kind of mean, but aloof mean. This kid had a crush on me, and we were flirty in the way that we were mean to each other. When multiple people told me he liked me, I was obviously unapproachable. I was so mean and rude about it. I don't blame him for hating me afterward. I felt bad. I actually had a crush on him too the whole time, but my actions and attitude were embarrassing. Story 89. Can I just applaud you for saying cringeworthy instead of just cringe? Story 90. Back when I was lacking social skills and intelligence, the man who fitted my suit for my graduation party said, "Enjoy the night," to which I replied, "You too." It was not until I paid for the suit that I realized what I had said. Otherwise, I would have run away. Story 91. In 8th grade, I accidentally showed off for the most popular girl in my class while playing a game of coeducational basketball in physical education. I have a longer, more self-indulgent version of the story available for those who want to cringe at my pretentious delivery of the tale as well. Story 92. A few days ago, in my country there was a popular TV show named Yo Soy, I Am, where people imitated singers. Some performances were bad. At my school there was a team activity with groups. Yellow, red, and green. I was on the yellow team and we needed points. I had a boxer glove in my backpack, tied it around my head, and danced with it. The worst part happened when a girl I liked was sitting next to our math teacher who was also judging the dances and next to a guy I dislike who she was close to. A friend told me to throw the boxer glove to her. I aimed, but the glove accidentally hit the side of the math teacher's face and slipped to the floor. I saw the teacher's blank expression. What made it worse was the song I was dancing to, Karma, by Jojo Siwa. The person who checked the songs for appropriateness didn't understand English and told me it was a Japanese song. I think I don't need to explain why the girl I like doesn't give me a chance. Story 93. Robbed a kid of his candy with two of my friends in the middle of the street when trick-or-treating. His father was a postal worker, and next thing you know, he visited all three of our houses before I even came home. I think someone reported us, but I will never know for sure. Story 94. Hung out with other kids and drank alcohol every day at age 15 and 16 for 3 years. Story 95. I was hyper-focused on getting boys to notice me, so almost everything I said, did, or wore was completely embarrassing. Story 96. Wore a trench coat. Attached a giant trailer chain to my wallet. Story 97. Bleached the tip of my hair blonde. I did it at the beginning of summer just in case I did not like it. Long story short, I did not like it and ran into my crush at the theaters a day later. The first thing she said to me was, "Nice hair. That is different." Story 98. We used to hang out outside the neighboring high school waiting for people to get out. Story 99. I regularly dressed up as Miranda Sings and made the cringiest videos with red lipstick all over my face. I talked like her constantly. Luckily, I never went to school like that, but no wonder I had no friends. Now I am 20, and I think I have had a massive glow up. Story 100. For my 10th grade, I spiked my hair down the center after using a lot of hair gel. It has now been immortalized in my 10th grade yearbook. I had no idea why I even did it. It was strange. Story 101. I basically copied Cameron from Modern Family by wearing a full Iron Man suit from Party City on dress like a superhero day instead of a t-shirt like everyone else. This was for a grown-up job. I was not a teenager. Story 102. Watched or read some adult animated content secretly, but not the most disturbing ones since I get traumatized with some. Pretended to be in a relationship. Had drama with friends. Story 103. There were 2 lunch breaks at my junior high school. I had the second lunch, and there were still classes going on during my lunch break. A few friends and I went into the girls' locker room while they were in gym class. We yelled into the locker room to confirm it was empty, took all the girls' clothes, and threw them into the showers. Not a single friend who was involved said a word. We never got caught. This was in the late 1980s. Story 104. I was rude to a fast food employee. It was the only time I have ever done that, and I still think about it 18 years later. Wendy's employee, wherever you are, I am sorry. Story 105. I tried straightening my hair. I had a Mexican fro, and I just turned into the dollar store Justin Bieber and Paul McCartney. Story 106. I was a theater enthusiast and my high school performed Shrek the musical. Need I say more? Story 107. I tried to sing like Billy Corgan in a rock band. I still sweat and blush when it is brought up 20 years later. Story 108. I was gonna say Janet, the unusual girl in high school, but that seems secondary to most of these stories. Story 109. Crush and I sat alone at school after hours. She looked over at me and told me she dyed her pubic hair purple and asked if I wanted to see. Me externally, wow, that was probably a lot of work, but I think I'm good. Me internally, what the actual heck, dude? This was the easiest opportunity of your life so far. Story 110. I was suicidal but pretended to be interested in death and acted like I was gothic and edgy. I used humor about death to cover up my actual feelings. I wish I could go back and either end my life or get mental health help. Story 111. Not me, but back in high school, a girl I was friends with tried to catfish me with stereotypical emo guy photos. However, she left her location on, so I knew where she lived. I confronted her, and she just stopped talking to me and acted like I didn't exist. I should have waited, though, because I let her borrow a book, and I never got it back. Story 112. Doing that silly Naruto run to first lunch was so fun, though. Story 113. Tried to pretend that falling most of 3 stories and landing on my feet did not hurt to impress a girl. Story 114. Never in the entire history of planet Earth has anyone ever thought, you know what would make me seem cool and aloof? Story 115. Consistently convinced myself a different boy was secretly in love with me every few weeks. It just took one look. Story 116. Literally told the school picture day photographer, I am a goth, goths do not smile. Story 117. Everyone was always thinking they couldn't see me. No one ever called me out until I was 19. Story 118. I had a shooting star shaved onto both sides of my head when I was in high school. Story 119. Too many to count, but probably the time I met the voice actor of one of my anime crushes and proceeded to speak negatively about the character's spouse from the anime. They were like, okay, nice meeting you. Very cringe. Story 120. My parents let me wear a wave cap to 5th grade. I am very white. Story 121. My comment would be very long if I wrote about everything embarrassing I did. However, I will say I wore a tail to school. I was not a furry. I was emo and thought it was edgy and cool. Story 122. I tried to be cute and cut my own bangs, only to give myself a mullet. My mom found out immediately when I started wearing a silly Cookie Monster hat around the house. Story 123. Like many stories, mine starts with, I had a crush on this girl. I was the editor of the high school literary magazine. I anonymously submitted my own romantic poetry using pseudonyms and published them all. The poems had her name hidden in the first letters of sentences and other cryptograms. I thought I was clever. Story 124. I thought winning a summer's worth of stuffed animals from the local arcade and presenting them at my crush's door unannounced would win her over. Spoiler alert, it did not. Story 125. At 19, I dated a man who was about 36. My parents were very upset. Story 126. Talking about sex in public is possible, but I didn't know better. Also, maybe this wild man phase, but I was in a legitimately bad situation, so I made the best of it. Now that I think of it, during middle school, my friend and I were terrified of the monster war that was supposed to happen around the county. Half the bus was scared, or where I believed there was a ghost at my kitchen table because the strange kid told me so. In my defense, that kid really did know things he had no way of knowing and made altars and such, so I figured it was true. Story 127. I got very interested in the Church of the Subgenius in my senior year. All of the entries in my yearbook are like, it was great being in math class with you and hearing all about Bob. Story 128. Had a sleepover. Friends and I stayed up all night and decided it was a good idea to make my parents breakfast at 6 a.m. They politely acted like they ate the food, but recently told me the food was raw or semi-cooked. Either way, we were all so proud of ourselves at the time. Now I think about it every time I make any type of breakfast food. Story 129. Edgy and shock humor. I wish I had not gotten a Facebook account when I was a naive child. Story 130. I tried out for track because I thought it would make me faster. I did not make the team. Story 131. I need to create a spreadsheet in Microsoft Excel for the chronological organization of my teenage cringe. Story 132. A large amount of lysergic acid diethylamide. I finally experienced a bad trip at my first rave when I was 17. I never used it again. I continued attending raves well into my 20s though. The good times. Story 133. Thankfully, I did not have the confidence to be as embarrassing as I wanted to be. The fan fiction I was writing was really bad, but it was never posted. Story 134. Burned compact discs with Himesha songs and other Bollywood mixes. Story 135. Spending an hour in a Walden Books several Saturdays. Hanging around watching a hot older woman. She was 17, I was 14. 4 years later, she was at the same community college as me, taking business administration courses because she was the store's manager. She was shocked that I wasn't an English or American literature major, but a computer science major. She was assigned to be in the tutoring lab. Story 136. 8th grade. I rode the bus with a good friend of mine. He was really funny, popular, and just overall a great guy. He had this funny song he made up that he would goofily sing on the bus about going home or to school. He would make up different lines about whatever was relevant and funny that day, the weather, someone's football jersey, and so on. He was really good at improvising. He ended up moving away a few weeks before the end of the year. Everyone said they missed him, and bus rides were boring now. On the last day of school, I decided to pay tribute to him by trying his song on the way home. I failed miserably. Everyone on the bus turned and stared at me, making a fool of myself. It was a very awkward, silent ride home. Story 137. I decided to lip-sync a song at a talent show during summer camp. The song was "The Show Must Go On" by Three Dog Night. I had no idea it was a breakup song. I liked it because it used circus music. Also, I am a girl. I did not have a microphone, so I folded a piece of paper into a vague microphone shape and gave it my all on stage. Story 138. 8th grade dance. I ran in and tried to slide on my knees. Instead, I put a hole in my pants and then fell over on my face. Good times. Story 139. I just think back to the attempts I made to talk to different girls whom I had no business talking to in the first place. Absolute cringe. Story 140. I was trying to impress some girls, so I ran through a field really fast. I ended up tripping and busting my lip on the ground. Story 141. In 8th grade, I had a pair of dress pants and shirts with shoes and no socks. I thought I was Don Johnson. Story 142. I sent a girl the lyrics to a song, pretending it was a poem I had written for her. Thank goodness I chose an obscure song with Careless Whisper. Story 143. Oh no, here it comes. The most popular girl in high school had a crush on me for some reason and I got a date. Unfortunately, I already had a significant drinking problem, and I passed out early and wet myself. I have been sober for over 20 years now, but it was just that embarrassing moment. Story 144. Went through a phase where I was obsessed with Eminem. I must have been 12 or 13. I went to Walmart and stole a do-rag. I had no idea there was a black security tag stapled to the product that would beep on the way out of the store if not paid for and removed. Anyway, I ran out of the store, got home, and proceeded to cut the black security tag out of the do-rag. I walked around my school with a do-rag on my head and a couple of massive holes in it from cutting out the security tag. I thought I was so cool. Also, I left the size stickers on new era caps I stole. Story 145. I wrote a sonnet to my crush and put it in her locker. She thought I was a stalker. Oh well. Story 146. 4th or 5th grade. Last day of school. I had a huge crush on a kid and thought bringing a camera and being interested in photography would make me look cool. It would also give me an excuse to give people, especially the kid I had a crush on, good pictures that stood out. I took many pictures of my crush. At the time, I thought I was being discreet, but the camera roll was full of close-up pictures like a stalker zoom, and this was during the era of film. Story 147. According to my high school bullies, it was just existing. Story 148. Not really a me thing, but I see a lot of kids my age who sag around the Los Angeles area. It looks stupid. I don't know why they sag. Story 149. Probably not the most, but this is one that sticks with me. Carissa was not a popular name growing up. I was never on those name trinket things, and it always bummed me out. Then I heard Freak a Leak and convinced myself that Krista or Crystal or whatever name it actually is was Carissa. I played it for my dad so I could show him my name was in a song. I didn't even understand what the song was about, but I remember him side-eyeing me with concern while driving. Kill me now. Story 150. I was both the weird edgy goth kid and the school enthusiast whose main personality trait was really liking anime and Japanese culture. Initially, I was convinced I was a half-demon like Inuyasha and just needed to unlock some power I thought I had. I wore a lot of cat ears in public. I bought a katana that I tried very poorly to use to cut things. Eventually, I moved on to Naruto and paired my wardrobe of black band shirts and trip pants with anime shirts and the ninja headbands. I was obnoxious about it. I was convinced I was in the wrong universe somehow, and instead of keeping that ridiculous thought to myself, I was pretty open about thinking I was actually an anime character. Story 151. Used to wear black leather O.J. Simpson type gloves in 90-degree weather. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.